Thank you, Chair. Good evening. First, some personal information relevant to my questions. I'm a water resources and irrigation management specialist with over 40 years experience in these disciplines, most recently as a consultant to the World Bank and Asian Development Bank. I've been engaged with Hampshire chalk streams for over 22 years, more recent through the Hampshire Water Partnership, and more recently as a member of the Upper Itchen Initiative and as a trustee of the Vitacrist Conservation Trust. I'm seriously concerned about the current poor state of the Upper Itchen, an iconic river designated as a special area of conservation. My questions centre around water quality in Southern Water's 2024 Draft Water Resource Management Plan. In this document, Southern Water state that the plan, and I quote, sets out how we plan to maintain a high quality and reliable supply of water for customers and improve the water environment for future generations. My question, firstly, how can you improve the water environment if you make little or no mention of water quality in your draft water resource management plan, which I've read? Secondly, your plan states that you are committed to your Catchment First programme, yet there appears little evidence either in the plan or in the field that you're doing anything practical to reduce over-fertilisation of farmland and reduce soil erosion and harmful surface runoff into the River Itchen. Could you please tell us how you're engaging with stakeholders to protect the water quality of our chalk streams from these hazards, and what practical actions have arisen from this approach to date? And finally, Southern Water currently pumps wastewater from the Alresford Wastewater Treatment Works in the chalk aquifer at the headwaters of the River Itchen, the same chalk aquifer that feeds our river. This wastewater contains high levels of phosphates, greater than 5 milligrams per litre in some cases, and these are your figures which I've obtained, which amounts to several tonnes every year. This is a time bomb. This wastewater discharge is contributing to the poor quality of the Upper Itchen now and will do so in the future, as shown in these photographs. So the first photo shows a lifeless section of the Itchen at Ovington with a gravel covered in brown, harmful algae. No natural weed, no fish, and few invertebrates. The second photograph, which is my colleague Howard's hand, shows brown algae deposited on natural river vegetation, indicative of the high level of pollution in the Upper Itchen. And then the third photograph, which is the worst of all, is strings of Cladoforia, a phosphate-enriched algae which cuts out sunlight, chokes natural river weed, and sucks oxygen out of the river. So my question, when will Southern Water install a phosphate stripper at Alresford and stop pumping these harmful pollutants into the Itchen aquifer? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Can I just interrupt for a second? We're now streaming.
We are now streaming and on YouTube again. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're now streaming, and we've made notes to add to the minutes in a moment. So if you'd like to carry on, sorry to interrupt you.
Thank you, Chair. So there's a lot of in those questions. So the first part, the water resource management plan. So as I'm sure you're aware, there are two sets of planning that run in parallel. So the water resource management planning and the drainage and wastewater management planning. Again, personal view, but all of that is to do with the effective management of the water cycle, because that's what we're talking about, and how society interacts with that water cycle. Where those two come together is in our planning for our 5-year business planning cycle. So you refer to catchment first, for example. So in AMP7 we've spent, so AMP7, sorry, that is the period 2019 to 2024. We will have spent about £32 million on catchment activities, much of that with farmers, and I will write to you, Chair, with details of where that is, where that's been happening. I expect that we will at least be doubling that in the next AMP period, and that integrated approach to managing catchments is an approach that we are wholly committed to. On the specifics of Alresford and the wastewater treatment works there, again, as I'm sure you're probably aware, there's been a lot of investigations that we've been required to do by the Environment Agency to investigate what pathways may or may not exist between the treatment works, groundwater, and the Itchen. That is still ongoing. I'm very happy to meet with you, with the Environment Agency, and talk through the sort of the details of what that is showing and may show in the future, because it's not, those studies are not yet complete. Will we be investing in Alresford treatment works? The short answer to that is I don't know in the here and now, but I will write to you or I'll write to you, Chair, with an update on what we are or are not planning in AMP8, so the 25 to 30 period.
Could I just say something, Mr. Chairman? You are aware, obviously, of the issue we have from farmland and the build-up of nitrates. These are now coming into our systems from groundwater. This has been going on for 40 years. I knew about it when I worked in Cambridge 50 years ago and attended an evening class on farming. We were warned then about nitrates going into the groundwater. This is now coming out, and on the Kennet, you now have nitrates coming out of the groundwater, and you have to dilute the water because it's got the nitrate levels are too high for human consumption. Therefore, when you're talking about water quantity, if your quality is not good, you will have to find additional resources to dilute the poor quality water. So you cannot keep pumping phosphates into the chalk aquifer and expect to get away with it. It just won't work. It's building up, and it will be critical. If it's not critical now, it will be in years to come, and it has to stop.
So I totally get what you're saying. I don't believe it's yet proven that at that specific location the treatment works groundwater river pathway is proven, but as I say, I'm very happy to meet with you and discuss all the data. On the nitrates issue, you are absolutely spot on, which is why, and I've said this before, it's so important that we're working in partnership, because that is largely, but not exclusively, an issue of how we manage our land and what we do with our land, and we can play our part as we do in many catchments to pay farmers to be using their land in different ways, to be adopting different land management practices. But it does need a partnership between the water company, farmers, regulators, to identify, in specific geographies what the best intervention is. Because I agree with you, blending water to deal with a nitrate issue is not a particularly cost-effective solution.
Just have to say, you have Alresford sewage treatment works under your full control. You can put a phosphate stripper in there this year, and that resolves the problem. Marlborough had this problem with a phosphate stripper, needing a phosphate stripper. It's been put in, and I understand it has produced results.
Thank you. Can we now have Ian Driver? Right.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Ian Diver. I'm an engineer and a data scientist. I live in Alresford. I'm here tonight because, like my colleague, I'm passionate about our beautiful chalk streams and the unique ecosystems that they support. I'm also increasingly worried about the evidence that we just had a glimpse of there in the photographs of the increasing nutrient pollution that we're seeing in the headwaters of the Itchen. So if I may, I have 3 questions. My first one then is about new builds. So we've already mentioned Alresford, the Appledown Lane treatment works. So with 320 new houses scheduled to be built at Sun Hill in Alresford, what plans does Southern Water have to manage that increased wastewater load on the treatment works at Appledown Lane, particularly with respect to phosphate? Secondly, about septic tanks and small sewage discharges. So in the Upper Itchen catchment, large numbers of homes are not on main sewerage and have to rely on septic tanks or a small sewage treatment plant. Now, I believe, and we have scientific evidence that I've seen from Natural England, for example, that poorly maintained or sited private sewage systems can be at a local level significant contributors to phosphate and other forms of pollution in our chalk streams. So given the need to achieve a nutrient neutrality, what are Southern Water and indeed of interest to hear from Natural England perhaps, what are you doing as agencies to manage nitrate and phosphate from those small sewage discharges? My third question is about clean water. Which of Southern Water's regional supply works, so we mentioned Otterbourne, also places like Totford on the Upper Itchen, which of them routinely add phosphate to their drinking water output? If you do this, it would be interesting to know what concentration of phosphate you do that, expressed as PO4 ideally, and if you are adding it, what's your justification for doing that?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch where you live in the community where the 220.
So I live in Alresford, in New Alresford, and there's a development about 50 metres from my home on Sun Hill, which is being built by Taylor Wimpey, about 320 houses.
So, I mean, I don't know the specifics of of that development, but I'll just sort of talk in very general terms, because I think there's a couple of really quite important points in here. So we are a statutory consultee on strategic plans. So local authority 5-year plans we're a statutory consultee on, and we will give advice on the overall plan in a location and the capacity of our sewage system to cope with new developments and our ability to supply water. But we are not a statutory consultee on individual developments. Now, you and I might think that is a little bit odd, and we also don't have the right to refuse to connect developments to our system either. So we are very reliant on having excellent working relationships with local planning authorities, which in the main we do. But it does mean that sometimes we are quite late to some discussions about how particular developments happen and what the opportunities might be in developments to mitigate some of the risks associated with those developments, and particularly to go back to the sort of the surface water and CSO issue, looking for opportunities to reduce surface water runoff and surface water getting into the combined sewage system. On your point about phosphorus, again, I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch what your question was. At what level when do we dose for phosphorus in our treatment works, or?
Yes, I'd be interested to know whether you do that or not. I know that some water authorities do add phosphorus to our drinking water. The justification is often the risk of old lead pipes. It's the plumber solvency question. So I'd be interested to know whether you do that, and if so, at what level? Because clearly, if phosphate is being added to drinking water, that can only add to the pollution problem when that drinking water becomes wastewater.
So, so you're right. In certain locations and certain treatment works, we do add phosphorus to, not treatment works, water supply works. We do add phosphorus to the to reduce the amount of lead that's in the pipes, and it's called it's got a technical name which I'm afraid I can't remember at the moment. I will get you the details of, the specifics of, how much we add and under what conditions. But this is highly regulated by the Drinking Water Inspectorate, who are the water quality regulator, and we are, we comply with all of those regulations. You make an extremely good point about the role that we can all play, though, in reducing the amount of phosphorus that is getting into our environment, and that is, we all have a role to play in that, in the choices that we make about the products that we use, and to recognizing that many of the products that we use and are used in agriculture do contain, significant amounts of phosphorus that ultimately get into the environment.
If I may, a quick supplementary, I would be interested to know in your AMP7 or AMP8 planning whether there are things that you could do to help improve the potential septic tank problem. For example, making it cheaper for people to get mains connections, to offer free maintenance checks, for example.
Yeah. So I don't know the details of what we've got, what we're currently planning to put into AMP8 for domestic septic tank provision. There are some places, and actually the Upper Itchen is one, where there is some evidence that septic tanks may be a significant part of the phosphorus pathway into the Itchen. So it's a point very well made. I will get back to you with some of the details of what we're planning to put into our business plan. I know this sounds a little bit like I don't know what I'm talking about, but at the moment, our business plan for that 25 to 30 period, we are right in the guts of writing it at the moment, and it's changing on a virtually daily basis. We have to submit it by the end of October, so. That's why I'm sort of caveating some of the things that I say, because there's still quite a lot of customer acceptance and customer engagement that needs to go on, so that we get the right balance between a plan that delivers the regulatory obligations that our regulators expect, with a plan that is practically deliverable by us, with a plan that is affordable for customers as well, and it's getting that right balance.
Thank you. I realise I've asked some very specific questions, but I do look forward to having some specific answers.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can we have Boardman, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name's Howard Boardman, and I'm a retired chartered engineer and ex-programme director. I now carry out a whole range of conservation activities on the River Itchen, where I've been a volunteer river keeper for the last 15 years. So I have some first-hand knowledge of what I see in the river. I've got a three-part question. First one is to do with leaks. According to Southern Water's own website, 70% of the water that you supply comes from groundwater. So anything to reduce what is extracted from the aquifer will ease the pressure on the same reservoir of water feeding our precious chalk streams. Therefore, what's Southern Water's current estimate of your percentage losses due to leaks through the Southern Water network and the Itchen Valley in particular? And what is the plan, including time scales, to reduce those losses? My second question, which has already been touched on by a couple of people, is sewage discharges. And discharge and spillage of raw sewage into the River Itchen is an ever-increasing issue. And I used the case study of the appalling recent overflows of the main sewer outside Brambridge Garden Centre in Kiln Lane, Otterbourne, during heavy rainfall in November and December as a prime example. This has actually been going on for many years, to my personal knowledge, because it's a route I travel frequently. But between mid-November 22 and early January this year, there have been several major incidents which have attracted quite a lot of media attention, which many people will have seen. Finally, the Environment Agency have now installed a monitoring station just downstream of the site to assess the real impact on the river, although no heavy rainfall has occurred since it was installed, so the results that I'm monitoring is not showing any major issue, because there's nothing coming out of the sewer. However, I'm heartened to see that some remedial works are underway at long last by Southern Water. But what confidence have you got that that remedial work, which actually solved the problem? Because I have my doubts, having spoken to the engineers. So what is your plan B? My third question is on drought. In view of the ongoing dry winter we're having, and with no sign of significant rain on the horizon, despite the heavy rainfall in the latter part of last year, what plans does Southern Water have to publicise the ongoing and deepening underlying water shortage in our region, to alert the public to start water saving measures earlier than the normal legal requirement? And on the same theme, apart from Havant Thicket, what are Southern Water doing to secure new sources of water, and or storage facilities to increase resilience in our changing climate, increasing populations and public demand for water? That's the end of my questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
So thank you. On leakage, our current level of leakage across the region, I'm afraid I don't have figures specifically for the for the Itchen Valley, is that we leak about 17% of the water that we supply. Now I'm just going to unpick a little bit how that's calculated. So that's calculated as the difference between the water that we take from the environment compared to the water that we supply to customers, and the difference is assumed to be leakage. Now, some of that is undoubtedly leakage. Some of it will be other things, but that is the calculated loss between abstraction and supply. In this year, so 2023, we are aiming to fix 27,000 leaks. That's our target for this year. I can tell you, because I'm part of this, the executive team, we look at the volume of water that we are leaking on a weekly basis. It is one of the top metrics that we are concerned about. I would say that the two things from an environmental point of view and from a customer point of view that we spend most time focusing on are leakage and pollutions. So I do want everyone to be to really get how seriously we take the challenge of leakage. So that's the sort of the leakage part of it, if you like. On the spilling, so you're absolutely right. We're in a and you could describe this across both our wastewater network and our water supply network. We're almost in I'm not sure if this is necessarily the right way of describing it, but we're almost in an arms race with the climate, where the climate is changing at a at a particular rate, and we are trying to keep track with that changing climate to ensure that we are able to reliably supply water of a particular quality, and that we have a wastewater treatment network that is resilient to a changing climate in the future. And one of the things that we're seeing with CSO spilling, for example, is the increase in those very intense, very energetic summer storms. That's caused real challenges to our network, and we've got to think about and plan, which is what we're doing with our CSO regional plan, how we make our network much more resilient to that different climate in the future, because that's actually what we're talking about. We make our network more resilient. That then has an impact on the environment. The environment becomes more resilient, and the system as a whole is much better able to cope with how that climate changes. So then, on making the water supply part of the equation more resilient, as you're absolutely right, Havant Thicket is a significant part of that. There are also regional water resource plans, which are in the southeast, are undertaken by a partnership, Water Resources Southeast, with the other water companies in the southeast. Then those plans are overseen by the environmental regulator across the country to bring a national plan, a national picture together. And in the sort of the medium to sort of long term, so I'm talking about the next sort of 20, 30 years, the sorts of solutions that we'll be looking at are how we can take water from North Wales, maybe down the River Severn, into the Thames Valley, with additional storage capacity, somewhere in the southeast, that can then supply more water into the specifically into the southeast, because you're absolutely right. We need to be taking much less water from the groundwater that supplies the Test and the Itchen, but other important chalk streams in the southeast as well. And we have a growing population, and we have we have the impact that climate change is happening, and even at the moment, the amount of available water in the southeast is equivalent to places like Morocco and Israel. So we do face a really a real challenge in the southeast, which is why we have been looking at options, as well as those sort of national, you might call them sort of network type of options, also looking at solutions like desalination, for example, which is is technology that's used elsewhere in the world. There may be parts of the southeast where desalination is a viable option. Looking at water recycling, where you at the moment, for example, on our coasts, we treat wastewater to really very high standards, and then it gets pumped out to sea. Well, there are technologies where you can take that water, clean it even more, then blend it with water in reservoirs or put it into rivers and abstract more by using that as a route to get more water as well. So it's a combination of using what we've already got most effectively, exploring new sources of water, looking at how we make further use of a national network, and then there's a role that we've all got to play as well, which is thinking very carefully about the water that we use. I'm pretty certain that in the future generations will look back at us and say how counterintuitive that we use drinking water to flush our toilets.
No, I think it's a very, very good point. So are you doing any publicity campaigns to the public to alert them to this problem rather than only when we're in dire straits later in the summer?
So there's two parts to that. On the short term water resources challenge. So you referred to a very dry beginning to the year, having had a very wet end of last year. As I said in answer to a previous question, we're doing a lot of monitoring, working with the Environment Agency, and because of the requirements to protect the Test and the Itchen in particular, we are required actually to be much more precautionary about moving to triggers to take action to protect those rivers from low rainfall. On the sort of the longer term, the amount of water that we all use, we have a program of work working with customers to try and help customers reduce their own water usage. Now, some of that's through home visits, some of that's through the provision of advice and guidance, some of it's through publicity activities, but to try and move to be more efficient. I have to say that in the southeast and in our Southern Waters supply zone, actually we have one of the lowest per capita consumptions in the country. We are much better at it than some other parts of the country, but we've got to do more.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Councillor Strange, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I represent Compton and Shawford Parish Council, and the parishioners have asked me to speak in regard to the recent water outages. The lack of maintenance has led to outdated and inefficient equipment in all areas, causing the recent contamination of the Otterbourne Reservoir. The fact that this happened so soon after the last outage does not give confidence in the service that we are paying for. The record on sewage disposal is abysmal, and parishioners have seen raw sewage in rivers and in towns, causing severe health hazard. Southern Water said that they had tested the water before restoring full flow. But what about the water that was already in the mains, which was then released through people's taps? The issues for health are many, putting pressure on already stretched health services and affecting vulnerable people of all ages. Vulnerable people were supposed to be delivered to direct, but we have been informed by one parishioner that although classed as vulnerable, he received no notifications, no water and no compensation on either occasion. The bottled water stations at South Park and Ryde were not opened until 2 days after supply had ceased, and also meant that people had to have a car to go and get supplies. Those without transportation had to ring the helpline to be able to get any help at all. This meant that until a delivery was made to them, they had no water to be able to drink, wash, flush their toilets or cook, leading to health problems for those with medical conditions. Even if able to go and get the allocation of bottled water, there was not enough to flush toilets properly, wash properly or clean clothes, causing hygiene issues. Those who had notifications were not given any information on how long the outage was likely to last, meaning that there could be no planning of resources. There have also been issues with the compensation promised. This was meant to be £30 per 12-hour period. Some parishioners have said that they either did not receive enough or received nothing at all. We would strongly recommend that Southern Water be penalised for their lack of service and ensure that a proper update of their equipment be carried out. Thank you.
So thank you very much, and I can only reiterate my apology to the first questioner, on the shortcomings on our service provision. I do apologise to your colleagues. I will provide, as I've already committed to a forensic breakdown of number of vulnerable customers that we supply bottled water to, and how many that we think we didn't supply bottled water to as well. One of the challenges that we have to deal with during incidents like that is that we have a list of vulnerable customers who register with us. Very often the local authority will have a list of vulnerable customers, and then quite often other services have lists of vulnerable customers as well. And trying to ensure that everyone gets the water they need is a challenge that we have to redouble, strengthen, get better at, because it's not right that vulnerable people are not getting water when they need it. So I absolutely understand the criticality and the concerns that people have. On compensation, we have paid compensation for the event before Christmas, and we, as I've said, we will be paying double the sort of statutory rate for this last event, and I said we will make that voluntary donation to the food banks as well. But I know that doesn't take away from the from the shortcomings in our service. Now, as I said, we'll be publishing a report on what happened and the actions that we will be taking. I mean, some of you will know the Otterbourne treatment works. We're already doing a lot of work there, and with plans to invest another 40 million to improve those works, and a similar amount to improve our Testwood works, which is closer to Southampton. On the point you made at the very beginning about the risk of contamination, I should be really crystal clear that the reason Otterbourne was shut down was because we detected our monitoring, our site protection systems detected that there was a risk of contamination, and that's why the site shut down. So there was no contamination whatsoever went off of the site, and we then had to go through a really rigorous cleaning operation, which is what took the time, and then to do the monitoring of the water that was being produced to be absolutely certain that it was of the right quality to go back into the network. So there was no contamination whatsoever that went off of the site. I think we should be quite careful that we don't blur the issues with water provision and what's happened at Otterbourne with the issues of pollution and CSO spilling, because they are quite separate.
Thank you.
I'm more worried about the vulnerable people who have health issues, who need water for whatever means. There are people with medical conditions, for example, somebody who has a stoma, who needs to wash thoroughly every day and weren't given water because they're not on your vulnerable register. And a lot of them don't have the technology to be able to find out how they get on the vulnerable register.
Yeah. I do totally get that, and you know, we, as I say, we'll be redoubling our efforts to try and ensure that we are getting to all of those vulnerable people. You know, should something like this happen again, because we do understand the absolute criticality of that service.
Thank you. Nicola Williams, please.
Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak this evening. I'm here representing a group of Southern Water customers who are becoming increasingly angry and frustrated. I think everyone in this room would agree that water services offer incredible value for money in comparison to other utilities. To know that you can rely on safe drinking water coming out of your taps and wastewater and sewage dealt with in an environmentally manner makes us a privileged first world country. Sadly for us, this is not always the case. Southern Water are guilty of a dereliction of duty. They have a duty of care to the environment and a duty of care to their customers. They are consistently failing on both counts. We, the consumer, have no choice in our supplier. Normal market forces don't come into play. We are tired of reading of the systematic dumping of raw sewage. Ofwat's annual target for such incidents is 94 annually. In the past year, 372 incidents of dumping of raw sewage by Southern Water were recorded, an increase on the average of 156 recorded in the previous 5 years, meaning that the practice is on the increase. In fact, it's more than doubled. We are tired of hosepipe bans when Southern Water leakage levels stand at 94.9 megalitres per day. That's 37 litres per customer. Locally, we have suffered loss of water supply twice in 6 weeks. Some customers have had no water for 4 days on each occasion. We have to drive to pick up plastic bottles of water for all our daily needs. Some of us were supplied with 500 centilitre bottles of water. A toilet cistern takes 6 litres of water. That's 12 bottles to open, 12 plastic bottles to recycle for each flush. I've been contacted by many dissatisfied customers, one of whom was a young mother with 7 children. She was at breaking point. Customers with doubly incontinent dependents were struggling to cope without the ability to fill a bath or run their washing machine. We are told that they were unrelated incidents, but the truth is that the infrastructure failed to cope as a result of lack of investment over a great many years. Every water company in the country was having to cope with the freeze-thaw issue in December, and yet others managed to keep the tap water flowing. Whilst living with no running water, communication with customers was sketchy. Some receiving text messages, but the vast majority of us relied on local grapevine to find out when supply would be returning. Tankers of water were used, but we were never asked to actually use water prudently. Washing machines were turned on, dishwashers and showers were taken, and soon supply was drained. When the supply did return, it was milky for days afterwards, with some customers experiencing a pink residue. Compensation is a lottery. Some have received none, some have paid £60 for 24 hours loss of supply, as laid out in the company guidelines. Those of us who lost supply for upwards of 4 days are having to chase what is owed. There is a huge variation between neighbours. Any customers who are vulnerable are losing out. It was promised that the compensation would be paid into our accounts automatically. Sadly, this is not the case.
Can you finish up, please?
I've got 2 questions, that's okay. Actually, the second one doesn't apply. Can you tell me what criteria were fulfilled by both the CEO and the CFO to deem their performance worthy of their large bonuses? Bearing in mind that the company performance was assessed by Ofwat to have a rating of 16 out of 17 companies in the UK. The only company to have a poorer performance rating was Thames Water, which coincidentally is where the CEO was formerly employed.
Thank you.
So the bonus system that the company operates is overseen by our remuneration committee. So it's an independent board committee that oversees that bonus system, and it is very tightly tied to environmental and customer service metrics, such as the ones that you have described. I'm not going to pretend that our performance in terms of our water provision over the last few months in this geography has been anything other than poor, and I do apologise for that. As I've said previously, we will, in detail, catalogue both the provision to vulnerable customers, but also the compensation payments, because I've heard from a number of times now that people haven't been paid. I think we need to go back and just check on that, because that's not how I think it has happened. So I think they have been paid, but I'm hearing a lot that there are people who haven't been paid. So I just want to check that the information I'm getting is right. And if you'll allow me, I will come back to you on that when I've checked that, because I think it's important to bottom it out. You're absolutely right. We are regional monopolies, and there is very little competition, or the competition is minimal in the domestic market, and that's a very privileged position to be running a business in, and we are acutely aware of the responsibility that comes with that. So that's why the amount that we pollute, the amount that we leak, the degree to which customers are out of service, those are metrics that matter hugely to us, and we are striving to improve our performance. I can see some areas where I can see that performance is improving, but the challenge for us is accelerating that and making it more sustainable, more resilient.
Thank you. Dr. Paul Spencer, please.
Could I just clarify something? Because it's what has been missed out in that statement is that the directors received extra compensation for facilitating Macquarie Asset Management investing 500 million in the company, and it would be wrong not to pick up that point, because that contributed heavily to their bonuses.
Councillor Bourne, would you like to sort of wait that bit back till when we were asking the questions through? Thank you.
Apologies.
No problem.
Good evening. My name's Paul Spencer. I'm the Executive Director of Winchester Business Improvement District. We are a business funded and business led organisation working with over 700 businesses in Winchester City Centre. Of course, there's concerns which have already been raised about thousands of households and businesses being affected by either low water pressure or water outages across Winchester, Test Valley, Eastleigh and Southampton. There's also been outrage over raw sewage pouring into our rivers and overflowing from drains into our streets. I'd like to specifically ask a question about sewage pouring into Winchester High Street last year as drains overflowed after heavy rain. This is not the first time this has happened, and it appears to be a recurring problem that the infrastructure is not coping, and some investigation and investment would be required to address this. These instances have clearly been appalling for users of the city centre, who've had to step over human waste, use toilet paper and sanitary products, and of course it's incredibly unpleasant and disruptive to our local businesses. Southern Water carried out work in the autumn of last year to remove blockages following the most recent incident. And I would say thank you to the operatives involved in that and keeping me and my team updated on the schedule. However, can I please ask why this work wasn't carried out sooner? And also from the work that's been done, what reassurances you can offer us that we can try and prevent this being a recurring problem in our city centre? Thank you.
Sorry, almost certainly should have been dealt with earlier and quicker. As you say, the short-term mitigations have been put in place. There is we're scoping the sort of the medium-term plan to put in a more resilient system going forward. So we've relieved the short-term pressure, and we're planning for a more permanent, longer-term solution. Should have happened quicker, probably.
Are you able to give a sense of the timescale, say medium term? Just
so I can give you a timescale in terms of scoping the works, which that will be over the next 6 months. Then it will almost certainly be in it'll probably be in the sort of 24, 25, 26 period that works will actually happen. But I will I'll get a more definitive date back to you.
Thank you. Councillor Wallace. Yeah. Thank you. The document you sent me earlier has been forwarded on to Southern Water and Natural England, so it may help save time.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit to that, Chair, if that's okay. Thank you. Right, good evening. So I've listened to all the questions that have been asked tonight by residents and councillors about the impact of water outages and the wastewater discharges into our waterways. I've listened to your answers where you've apologised, talked about the challenges, the need to work with partners and the plans you have in place. All your responses sound reasonable. However, this doesn't appear to align with real world performance. Southern Water's annual performance report 2021 to 22 shows that you missed your water quality compliance target and missed every one of your wastewater performance commitments. The British Water Company Performance Survey ranked Southern Water the worst of any water company in the UK. Ofwat's Water Company Performance ranked Southern Water second worst out of 17 water companies across England. The latest Environment Agency annual report on the environmental performance of England's water and sewage companies showed the performance of the companies measured against a 4-star rating. Southern Water fell to just a 1-star rating, meaning, and I quote, their performance was terrible across the board. Our residents expect better. Words are not enough. It's time we saw a real improvement in Southern Water's performance. We're here tonight because thank you for coming tonight and for answering the questions as best you can. They were raised as well because we had a motion that we took to council that was agreed by council because we were concerned about the amount of water that is being discharged into our local rivers and waterways. It's happening too much. It's happening. We've got data from the Rivers Trust shows over 3,500 hours of sewage discharge in just 1 year. It's incredible. We've already heard lots of words about what Southern Water is planning to do to mitigate this unacceptable situation, but it is time for action. The City Council itself has limited powers in what we can do, but we do have control as a planning authority. And as the planning authority, Winchester Council has a responsibility to assess the potential for new developments to affect sewage outflow into watercourses. To help us do this, we need Southern Water's support. So going forward, will Southern Water commit to supporting the council by providing information on which treatment works will be managing the sewage for new developments, and to provide an assessment of the anticipated impact of the development on the number and duration of sewage discharges into local rivers or seas? This is information that we need to be able to help us with our planning decisions. Issues with our wastewater systems continue to plague our local villages. In Hambledon, there have been long-standing issues connected with the inadequacy of the pumping facility, similar to what we've heard about in other villages tonight. I know I've sent this question to you beforehand, so I'm not going to repeat it all, but I would appreciate an update on where we are on both the short and long-term fix for Hambledon. Similarly, there's an area in Waltham Chase where we regularly get sewage discharges and have done for years and years. And these incidents have been reported for years and years, and they still get sewage discharges. So I would like an update on what Southern Water is doing about that. Finally, Southern Water owns a massive amount of land, 5,500 acres. The government's made it clear that environmental land management is critical for local nature recovery, that we need to support all of the work we're doing here. Please, can you confirm how much of the land owned by Southern Water is being actively managed to support nature recovery, and what plans does Southern Water have for improving their land management? Thank you.
So all very fair questions. On Hambledon, I'll get back to you with a sort of full written update on where we are on the infiltration reduction plan. We have done a significant amount of sewer lining work. There's more sewer lining work planned, but I will detail against the infiltration reduction plan. On Waltham Chase, I passed your concerns to the ops team, who are doing a review of what the problems are there. On the use of our land, absolutely. 9,000 hectares, which is broadly what our land ownership is a significant land holding. It is the smallest land holding of any of the water companies, though. So we have to balance what we need to produce land for our operational activities. So land for bigger storm tanks, land to expand sewage treatment works on, land for a water supply network, land for pumping stations. So there's that usage. We want to use it as much as possible to generate renewable energy, so that we're reducing our carbon footprint, because, as I'm sure you'll appreciate, running a water company with the amount of pumping of water and wastewater that we do is a highly energy and carbon intensive activity. So what we can do to generate renewable energy, and then, as you say, what we can do for nature recovery as well. Now, at the moment, we're working on a land management strategy to enable us to make those choices and those decisions in the round. I'll be very happy to come back to this committee and talk about what that land management strategy will look like. but absolutely, nature recovery, biodiversity net gain will be at the at the heart of that strategy and how we use our land.
I think you missed one point about what are you going to do about the performance of Southern Water?
Oh, right, yeah. So, so you're absolutely right. Our performance has not been good enough. And you can, as you did, you can list the metrics where that is catalogued. And again, you're absolutely right. I can sit here and say, words of apology. I can say, warm words and convincing words about the plans that we have in place. But actually, the only thing that matters is that our performance improves. So when I say, we are forensically focused on the amount that we're polluting, our leakage, our customer service, that is absolutely true. So, for example, in the year 21-22, we caused 12 serious pollution incidents. Last year, we caused 5. Now, that's 5 too many, but it is an improvement on the previous year. We've reduced our total pollution incidents by about 35% from 21 to 22. On CSO spilling, I've already described the plans that we have, the pathfinders that have been going for the last couple of years. Now, it won't feel like it, but we are at the forefront of what the industry is doing to reduce CSO spilling, to reduce those spills to the environment, because we know how much it matters to customers, it matters to us. The majority of our staff live in the southeast. It matters to them that the company that they work for performs a lot better than it currently is and has been.
Thank you, Councillor Worth. Now, we did, as a committee, give you an idea of some of the questions that we wanted to have answers to. Some of those you've answered already today, but would you like to run through the list and give us your replies?
I think I've probably said everything that I need to say, but if you've got more questions to ask me, then please.
Right, members of the committee. Councillor Warwick.
Yes, thank you so much, Chairman, and thank you for coming along this evening to answer our questions. I'm a ward councillor for Compton, Shawford, Otterbourne and Hursley that all suffered an outage just before Christmas and just a few weeks ago. We've had several residents have said this week that the quality of their water, they're nervous about that, whether it's sediment or increased turbidity. And I know you've been sampling at those residents' homes. 1 or 2 of them have been told not to drink their water and to cook with it. And that message is making other residents nervous. So I really need, in the next day or so, your reassurance about the quality of the water that's coming through our taps from that Otterbourne reservoir, and whether that water is genuinely safe for all of us to drink. So that I can't stress how important that is for us to have that reassurance. I don't expect you to know the answer tonight, but I think I do need that feedback this week, if possible. Thank you.
So I will give you that reassurance now. I'm our Director of Quality and Environment, so my responsibility in the organisation is to ensure that we are doing as little damage to the environment as possible, doing as much benefit to the environment as possible, but also to ensure that we're providing the right quality of water. And as I said in answer to a previous question, the reason that Otterbourne shut down was because our monitoring and our safety procedures worked exactly as they should work, and that shut the works down. And we have been absolutely fastidious in ensuring that the product that we are producing from that works absolutely meets all the requirements of the drinking water inspectorate. I'm not sure why anyone's received advice not to drink the water.
If I may, so there are at least 2 houses that are having additional testing, and one of those has been issued in a notice not to drink or cook with their tap water. So whether that is a problem with their connection or whether that's yours, but that message has got out wider than those 2 households. So that's why we need your reassurance.
If you tell me, we'll take this outside, but this will be 2 very specific issues, because I can reassure you that the way we operate our water provision system is it's like almost like a series of cells where there are hundreds of properties who are getting the same water. So if there were any systematic problem with the water, it would apply to hundreds of properties, not to individual properties. So it'll be something very specific, probably to the sort of private link from the main network to their houses. But let's just have a conversation outside. Yeah.
Councillor Williams.
Hello, also ward councillor for Badger Farm and Oliver's Battery, so one of the areas affected. My question is actually quite different and for a different part of the community, farmers. So one of the issues that I felt, particularly with the first outage in December, but also still with the one we had recently, was that it felt like it wasn't an area that had really been looked at and considered by Southern Water. There's a real need for farmers, particularly livestock. So I'm reliably informed that they need, if you've got dairy cattle, they need about 100 litres of water a day per cow. That's a significant amount. When I spoke with people, they were saying, oh, could you highlight the areas and tell me where the farm is? And I thought, I'm not being funny, but you deliver water. If you're delivering 50,000 litres of water a day to somewhere, which you will with a large amount of cattle, I would assume you would know that that farm would need a lot of water. And those little litre bottles, it's going to need a lot of them to do 100,000, 100 litres per cow. It was a real sort of shock. It took me a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails to actually get any support out to our farmers. They work tirelessly and we need them, and they are a vital part of our community, and they struggle for workers and just generally, I know the wit's end that they all were at, having to have additional work heaped on them just before Christmas and just again. And really it just feels, when you know that they exist, it shouldn't be a shock to you. And why is there not a decent infrastructure in place so they are immediately there at the front getting the water that they need?
So entirely fair point, and it is one of those areas where I think we do need to get better in how we provide that alternative response when there is a significant outage. There is a link here though to some of the conversation we've been having about drought and about how the impacts of surface water runoff on the network, because many farms of course have big roofed areas, and I'd be very happy to have conversations with the farming community about how together we can provide effectively big water butts for agricultural premises, because I think that would help to provide some resilience. It helps in the amount of water that's running off potentially into the system, and also it could be a bit of drought mitigation as well. So I think that would be a fruitful conversation to have.
Thank you, Councillor Cutler.
Thanks for the opportunity for a question. I mean, as a former dairy farmer, I'm not going to ask anything about dairy farms because my supply was from Portsmouth Water, so it was never a problem. We haven't mentioned the River Meon at any stage here. So the River Itchen got quite a lot of concerns, and justifiably so. But the Wickham water treatment plant and the storm drain there causes considerable problems. I think we had in 2021 51 discharges from the treatment works and 37 from the storm drain. And I recently had an email from someone who's upstream from there in Wickham and claims that during heavy rain there is a real problem with sewage that's not coming from the storm drain and not coming from the treatment works, which is further downstream. So I'm wondering about the reliability of some of the information we've got about discharges anyway. Because when I look at the interactive map, for example, I can't see any mention of the Hambledon plant, which I would imagine, given the way it's been being pumped for tankered for the last few months, has had some problems with discharges as well. It seems quite bizarre there that 3 million was spent on the flood defences of Hambledon, and of course the water comes out of Hambledon quicker and seemed to inundate the pumping station almost immediately. That happened. So I suppose my question is that it's partly a plea that the Meon is also considered when you're in your priorities as an important chalk stream, and maybe the Wallington as well. But also just a query about the reliability of the figures. We had the question before about an interactive map. The Rivers Trust map is the one most of us, I think, use for information for the Southern Water area, but it doesn't seem to be complete information. I just wondered if there's more information not covered here.
Sorry, in terms of so we have they're called event duration monitors. So they're the monitors on CSOs that log how long a spill has been occurring for, and then the Environment Agency have a methodology for ensuring that very short spills are sort of bulked up into a 12-hour period, and very long spills don't appear as just one, so they get cut up into 24-hour chunks if spills go on for a long time. One of the challenges, particularly in the Meon, is groundwater. So a lot of the problems that we see are a product of high groundwater levels, infiltration into the network, which then causes the spilling that we see, which is why the sort of the infiltration reduction plan for Hamilton is such an important piece of work. On the monitoring, I mean, I'll check with the Rivers Trust, but I don't think there's anything that we've got that they haven't got. But I will check that is the case. The Environment Agency look at and require us to give them all of the data that we have on event duration. Our event duration monitors. We have to do that on an annual basis, and then they publish the data from that. So you can go onto the Environment Agency website and you can look at our performance relative to all the other companies. And I would suggest that you do that. It's quite informative. But the more important thing is actually not that we're monitoring and reporting is important. What's more important is that we're doing something about it to reduce the frequency of spilling, which is absolutely what we are onto. And I give you my my full assurance that the Meon is not the the poor child of the chalk streams in the southeast. We are acutely sensitive to the particular challenges of the Mere, but also its importance as well.
Thank you. Councillor Bond, do you wish to ask any more? Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for coming tonight. I represent Upper Meon Valley, who was not as badly affected as some of my other council friends. But I do have a question that's may on the face of it seem far removed from, we've gone into a lot of detail with some very good questions from people that are way more qualified to ask and understand the answers than I am. But one thing and we touched upon it with one of the other questioners earlier about, the remuneration of directors, and it really goes back to, I'd like to understand what the sort of strategic alignment is that you expect from your now largest investor, Macquarie Bank, because as a company that's got pretty poor financial performance, you've got to ask, what are they in it for? And that matters, because that will fundamentally steer the strategy of your organisation. And that worries me, because the only way they will get out of it as a bank is by getting a better return on their investment. They've put 500 million in, and they're going to want something back for that, and they're going to want more. And I don't get it. And I wonder whether you could enlighten me and how that might benefit our community. Thank you.
So, yeah. So there's a number of aspects to this question. So Macquarie, when they bought Southern Water, or when they became the majority shareholder of Southern Water, they wrote a public letter to Ofwat that details what they expect the performance of Southern Water to look like, and their expectations of what the executive would be doing. And actually that details quite a lot of stuff about reduction in pollutions, reduction in leakage, and we'll get you a copy of that letter. It's on the Ofwat website, but we can I can get that for you. I'm not privy to all the sort of the inner workings of the Macquarie machine, but all the conversations that I have with them, they are committed to Southern Water for the long term. So this is not a short-term investment that is dependent on an annual return for their sort of return on their capital investment. By looking at a long-term investment, what they are interested in is how the value. So it's like buying a house. How does the value of your property increase over time? That's how you get the return on your investment. If you're looking at the purchase of a utility as being a long-term investment, then your return comes through the longer term increase in value of the business. Now that will be through some of that will be through the investment that will go in as part of the regulatory cycle, so that the value of the asset base increases, and that that then potentially gives a return at some point in the future. So it is that long-term commitment. And what I've seen in the last 18 months is, alongside that additional £1 billion investment that they made at the outset, they have made a number of other investments during the period of their ownership. So on the basis of speakers you find, I have found them to be an incredibly supportive and willing to invest where there is a good justification to invest. Now, a specific example of that would be, they have put more investment into dealing with leakage, for example, and they are looking at putting more investment in to deal with the CSO challenge as well. So I referred earlier to accelerated investment, getting permission from Ofwat to do that. Well, that permission also needs the support of shareholders as well. So they are continually demonstrating to me their commitment. Now, it's a little bit like, some of the other sort of conversations we had. It needs to be backed up by visible and quantifiable improvements in our performance. That is, frankly, the only thing that is going to generate the confidence amongst stakeholders, customers, that actually that investment, the people running the company are able to justify the privileged position that we're in as a regional monopoly.
Thank you, Councillor Westwood.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to bring Natural England into the conversation, as we've sadly quiet tonight. I mean, we started off with date night and so on, and the clearing the sewage. We've heard a lot about the problems with sewage overflow. I think the comment you made, Mr. Willison, about separating the operational issues and the pollution and the effects in the rivers with nitrates and so on is a distinction. So we've heard about how to handle a crisis, but I'd like to concentrate on the pollution that is going in those rivers, the extraction rates in those rivers, potentially planning to do to address some of these issues. Where do you stand on this?
Well, thank you for having me, and I'm glad I got a chance to speak. It's been waiting. So I've heard lots tonight. I think Natural England would agree and support a lot of the things that have been raised by the members of the public about the concerns that they see in the rivers. Our rivers are having a very difficult time, and they will do for another decade at least, I suspect. We have over-abstracted our rivers. We've used them to get rid of all of our wastes. We've not really valued or cared for them at all. And now we're seeing the knock-on effects of that. We're having droughts. We've got a changing climate. I like a pub lunch, like many people. And I always am struck when I go to a pub around the AGM, the Test, I live in Romsey, the big fish that they have in the boxes on the walls. You'll see those kind of things. We don't have fish like that in the river anymore. We probably won't again for a very long time. I think that's a really sad indication of what we've lost from our environment. And so it does worry me, the state of our environment and what we need to do to fix it. It won't be easy. Toby's sort of talked about those challenges that Southern Water as a company face, but it's on us as a society to decide what kind of environment we want. What do we want to pay for? What do we want to invest in? How do we want our future environment to look like? I think in my time that I've been working at Natural England and working alongside Southern Water, it's about 5 years or so now, I've heard lots of words about what they want to do, and I do but have to take them at face value about their desire to turn the company around and to make the right steps towards the outcomes, which I genuinely do believe they want to deliver on. It's really difficult, and I like to sort of think that we're trying to turn around sort of 2 centuries of systemic challenges around the water environment, where we've prioritised taking as much out and getting rid of the waste as quickly as possible. And we're now just at that bottom bit of the cycle. We're actually trying to turn that system around. So I think Southern Water have got a long way to go. I think it's a really difficult problem for them. Glad that they're up for it. I think they are. But I think we as a society need to hold them to account to make sure they deliver. And we need to hold our politicians to account to make sure that this continues to be a really important issue. because we'll only get as a society what we want by holding those people in power to account. And it's our job to provide that advice about what the science says, provide that advice to regulators and to water companies such as Southern, so that everyone has the evidence and the science and the clear steer about what needs to be done to make that place better.
And as the advisor, as the expert in that area, are you content with the plans that you see, not just from Southern Water, but from the water industry in other regions as well, as to what they plan to do? Do you really think they're on the course that we in this room want to see them go down, or not?
I think there are some really big challenges for the next decade or so facing the water sector. And we should have been having these discussions 10 or 15 years ago. So, but we are where we are. So I think if some of the solutions that Toby's talked about around reusing our water, about not filling up our toilets with drinking water, about not filling up ponds and washing our cars with drinking water come into place. If we build more reservoirs, if we stop leaking, all the sorts of things that Southern Water say they want to achieve, then we will be able to turn things around. But for sure, we've got a difficult decade in place before those sorts of solutions come into place. And again, this is where us as a society can start to decide, how do we want to use our water? What are the choices that we make? Do we flush wet wipes and other products down the toilets, or do we put them in the bin and dispose of them properly? These are the kind of choices we can all make that can help Southern Water deliver its objectives quicker, and which I think we all.
Okay, thank you. I do have a question for Toby, but I'll yield to Frank first. Councillor Pearson.
Yeah, carry on.
Well, thank you, Chair. I almost seem to be rewriting history. In the 1850s, the Dean of Winchester Cathedral, Dean Garnier, started an anti-muckability campaign. The issue in Winchester at that time, we're talking about Winchester town at that time, was cesspits in the upper town overflowing and foul water pouring down to Lower Winchester, i.e. this part of Winchester, polluting the freshwater wells in that area. Now, that led to finally the establishment of one of the first sewerage pumping stations, and it's called Garnier Pumping Station, which is in this Winchester area now. It also led to a court case which led to the right to clean water, where again cesspits were overflowing from the dyeing industry in the upper part of Winchester, dyeing as in DYE rather than dyeing as DIE industry, and polluting fresh water in the lower town again. That led to a world idea, the idea that every citizen should have the right to fresh water. Now, pretty well everything I've heard here is that things haven't changed very much since the 1860s, which is sad. We've had a whole series of people here asking learned questions, not just public, but also councillors, very valuable input. Hamble River, I know very well, because I'm a ward councillor for that area as well. It wasn't so much the overflow that upset people. It did upset people, of course it did. They didn't like to see a sewage fountain coming out from the sewer with the drain pipe cover being balanced on the flow of water out from the road. That upset people, but what upset them even more was the fact that it took, I think it was 2-3 weeks before somebody from Southern Water came down to clear up the mess. They had people on site pumping water to take up the excess water, which you're right, it is a lot of groundwater. The fact is the water was where people didn't want it, i.e. in people's cellars and in people's sewage in people's gardens. Reminds me again, anti-muckability campaign again. Waltham Chase, it's a slightly different issue there, although again it's a sewage issue. It turns out the piping put in when a new development was put in place wasn't actually put in correctly. Even though we had assurances from Southern Water and the builders that everything was right, and it wasn't. Water was coming up through the toilets, water was coming out onto the roads, and everyone looking around, oh, it's not us, Gov, it's someone else. Really is not good enough. That's not the sort of thing you're saying to people. I think one of you said something, you said, Natural England, you said quite rightly, we've got to decide how much we want to pay for the improvements. It's not a question of how much we want to pay, it's how much do we need to pay. Because we've not just got a clean water issue, we've got a health issue as well. And that has got to say to people somewhere, without saying, oh, it's not us, it's Natural England. It's not us, it's Southern Water. It's not us, it's the Environment Agency. For goodness sake, get together and sort it. We were talking in the 1960s, I'm an ex-geography teacher, in the 1960s about setting up a water grid, bringing water from Wales down to the southeast of England, because southeast of England was recognised at that time to be a drought area. It still is a drought area, except we get these now increasingly, not one in 100-year floods, but 1 in 80-year floods, which the system can't cope with. Now, I'd like to at least see people starting to do something like replacing these pipes. Where are you actually doing this work to replace these pipes? I know you've got a lot of pipes to replace. Can you name half a dozen places where this infrastructure is actually being improved? Because I've yet to find it on your website. I know Natural England say, well, we're concerned about nutrients going into the Hamble River. I'm concerned about, not recognised apparently, along with the Main, is not apparently a chalk stream in southern parishes. Well, it is, and you do get pollution. And we're told by people that the testing for the polluted water actually done in Southampton Water, not in the actual river itself. So we don't know what the actual purity of the water is actually coming down the river from the Hamble sewage river, which is just to the south of Bishop's Waltham. Again, blank information. You recently hosted Flick Drummond, our local MP.
Councillor Pearson, can we get round to the question?
Well,
please?
I have already said half a dozen questions in there. Since 1860, what on earth are you doing to improve the situation? We've got more people, yes, but you're not doing anything. Our citizens want to see signs where you are replacing this infrastructure, not just fiddling around with it, saying, oh, somebody's got to pay. Yes, we have. We know that will be. Some response to that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So in this 2020 to 25 period, we will have invested £2 billion in improving our infrastructure. We've talked about, Macquarie's investment. They put about an additional 500 million in. You can get on our website where all that investment has gone, and we'll give you the link to that website. On the what's happened, I think it's interesting to if you just think back to when the water industry was privatised, which is only 30 years ago. 30 years ago, 30% of the foul material that went to our treatment works was treated. 30% of it. The rest, the 70%, went directly untreated to the environment. Now, largely that was to the sea. So that's only 30 years ago. Now, 95% of the foul material that comes to our wastewater treatment works is treated. So, and I think actually that's quite a material improvement. Now, that's a product of investment. It's a product of improved technology, and it's also a product of the success of regulation as well. And you're absolutely right. You have to have all of those aspects. So the regulator, the regulated, the water company, investment, investors, and citizens, communities working together. Because some of the problems that we've seen in Winchester is some of that's about our infrastructure, undoubtedly, and you know, I think it's fair to criticise our response to that. But some of the build-up is a product of what gets into our pipes. So, you know, if fats and oils and grease are material that is not shouldn't be flushed, if that's getting into our pipes, that is the single biggest cause of failures in our system. So, you know, we've got you know, a pivotal role to play. The regulators have a really important role to play, and then as citizens, we have an important role to play as well.
Picking up two of the points there, the fatbergs you're talking about, what publicity campaign are you giving to our residents and our restaurants that material should not go down to the foul water system? That, if that is one of the single biggest cause, what are you doing about it? Other than putting something on the internet, which most people don't read. We know that. We suffer from the same issue in Winchester here. You've said, what's it, £2 billion into the sewage works, relatively small amount over 30 years. How much of the pipe working are you doing, or are you just depending upon new developers putting in the correct dimensional piping? What about replacing the Victorian piping, which is still in our villages and indeed in Winchester itself?
So that 2 billion is not over the 30 years. That 2 billion's in the 20 to 25 period. We do have a significant program of both network replacement, but also, you know, relining where it's more appropriate to reline rather than to replace. And there is new network going in all the time to, you know, to accommodate new development. So all of that replacement and improvement that is happening, that is ongoing. Sorry, what was the first part of your question? Sorry,
the publicity about the fatberg.
Oh, sorry, yeah. So we have teams of trade effluent inspectors who go around and talk to businesses. We have inspectors who look at the state of our network and look at evidence for the accumulation of fats and oils and grease. We've just invested in 20,000 sewer level monitors, and the artificial intelligence that goes with looking at the data that those monitor levels produce, and that is all about proactively dealing with any blockages in our network. So the combination of boots on the ground, investment in new technology, and then, you know, some of the sort of the campaigning activity that we do, some of that the Water UK, the industry trade body does a lot of that as well. You know, the combination of technology, boots on the ground, and educating is the sort of the strategy.
What education program are you putting in the way of architects who are designing their houses, with, for example, without a facility to use grey water? And what assurance can you give her that the architects and the town planners are actually putting in 9-inch drains, not the old 6-inch ones?
I think I'm running out. I'm not sure I know the answer to that. What are we doing for architects? So we've got some very clear principles that we we provide to local authorities on standards of not really construction standards, but things that we think should be taken into account when new developments are approved and constructed. So things like having not having any surface water connection to the foul sewer, having sustainable urban drainage systems, having water efficient houses, those types of activity. But it's a good question whether the industry does any work with it's RICS, isn't it? Maybe it's not RICS, but whatever the architects trade body is. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
There's four of us here on
No,
the phone,
councillor,
actually. We're not getting the.
Councillor, please. We are running short of time, so I'm trying to wrap this up. Yeah. I agree, but we've got to start wrapping it up now. So, Mr. Holden, have you got any other things you want to bring up and draw to our attention with phosphates and nitrates and pharmaceutical products?
If you want me to, I can, but I mean, if we're short on time, I could put it.
You're quite welcome to give a written answer.
So I was asked about current plans for nitrates and phosphates and pharmaceuticals, and what are we doing around that, other than just treating it through waste water treatment works. So if I start with nitrates and phosphates, Natural England has been running its catchment sensitive farming program for over a decade now. That works with farmers and landowners to give advice about how to manage their land in a more appropriate way, so that those phosphates and nitrates don't end up washing off the land and into watercourses. It offers advice and it offers capital grants to invest, so farmers can invest in the right kind of kit to look after their livestock, and advice about how to manage the soil as well, so that those nutrients go all into the crops and we can get more food rather than washing out and straight into the watercourses, causing the kind of problems we heard from the gentleman about algae growth earlier. In terms of pharmaceuticals, that's a real unknown. There's all kinds of products, chemical products in our waterways, many of which we barely understand about the environmental impacts it has on the wildlife, let alone what happens when we drink it. There's been lots of press coverage this week about PFAs, so-called forever chemicals, things like Teflon, that are pretty much indestructible. They accumulate in our tissues with no idea what impacts they are having, but we know that every time we test them in a lab, they kill the animal that's being tested. And we've no idea and they're present in all of our rivers across the country. Every otter in the country that's been tested has found those within their cells, and we've got no idea what that does. So in many respects, the phosphates and nitrates issue is a problem that we at least know about, and sewage is one of those things that's very much in the news, but there's a whole host of other pollution issues that we are only just beginning to get to grips on, which really concerns me.
Thank you. I think that concludes everything that we want to ask tonight. So I'd like to thank everybody for coming, particularly the members of the public, because I feel that it's been a very useful committee meeting. And I'd like to thank our guests here for the impartial advice and thoughts that they have on the subject. And we look forward to actually receiving your written answers to a lot of these questions. Thank you very much for coming in, and we really appreciate it. Thank you. I think we all need a 10-minute comfort break now. Thank you. Right. Welcome back. The Vice Chair will be back in a moment, I hope. Would you like to start your presentation? Oh, sorry, public speakers. I've forgotten. Mr. Parrish, please.
Good evening. My name is Tim Perry. I'm a resident of Tagdown Meads, Winchester, and a father of two. A few weeks ago, some friends and I kicked off a campaign to get a multi-use games area or mugger built in one of the parks of North Winchester. As the committee will know, a mugger is an outdoor space designed for a variety of sports and activities such as basketball, football, tennis, and more. We kicked off the campaign with a survey to assess the need for such a facility in the community. I'm delighted to say the feedback so far has been overwhelmingly positive, with 97% of the respondents welcoming a mugger in their community. We started the campaign as we believe there's a lack of all-weather recreational facilities and muggers in North Winchester for children and young people. Being a coach at Littleton Junior Football Club, I did see a disruption throughout the winter as pitches become unplayable. Furthermore, many children aren't part of clubs, nor have the finance to pay on council pitches. We chose a mugger for our campaign for many positive reasons, but the evidence is very clear. Children are more likely to engage in physical activity if they have access to a mugger. Increasingly, physical health has a positive impact on mental health and overall well-being. There are over 4,000 children and young people in the St Paul and St Barnabas wards, and there is no provision of mugger in these areas. This is a problem we need to address. By building a mugger, either Dean Lane or St Matthew's Park not only provides sports facilities within walking distance for these children and young people, it also addresses a concern about a lack of free-to-use facilities in these communities. Most importantly, a mugger will help promote physical activity amongst our community's kids and will bring families and friends together to play sport year-round. We want to do our bit to promote healthy life choices for these children in these communities. The results so far for the survey have been positive, as I've already mentioned. 97% of the respondents would see a mugger to be a valuable addition to the community. 99% of all the respondents live within Winchester, with 2/3 from St Paul's and St Barnabas wards. Over 90% would regularly use the mugger. Football was the most popular activity with 88%, followed by basketball, tennis and cricket. We need a plan. We're open to using the council's toolkit for community projects, but we feel the best outcome will be to partner with the council. Firstly, we need to agree the location of the mugger. I understand St Matthew's Park might be a preferable option. We need to agree a plan to finance. We believe the quickest way is to use the SIL, the Council Infrastructure Levy Fund, but we're also committed to fundraising for part of the mugger if needed. I should also send the friends and I who've kick-started this campaign have some experience fundraising. 2 years ago, we fundraised over £16,000 for a popular Cabs for Jabs fundraising effort where we helped over 500 people older people in our community get to and from their COVID jabs. We want to work with the council to quickly agree a timetable, and we'd like to move forward with that this year. Just to reiterate, so far we've had overwhelming support for this campaign in the community, and there's clear need for such a facility in this community, and I hope we can partner with the council to progress and hopefully get a mugger built this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much. Intake, please.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to address your committee. I've carefully read through the report and have looked at the accompanying presentation, both of which are interesting. I would mention that I grew up in Winchester, so experienced firsthand being a young person here, albeit almost 50 years ago. However, what was appropriate in my youth bears little resemblance to what young people want or need today. The report highlights that of all the areas covered, Stanmore, by a large margin, has the highest proportion of young people. What is alarming to me is that Stanmore has very few facilities for all these youngsters. The area has a high percentage of students, and whilst they bring vitality to the area, they also bring behaviours that sometimes don't accord with other residents, both young and old. There are also issues with drug and alcohol abuse amongst young people, and there are pressures on people's mental well-being. Whilst I'm a strong supporter of providing more affordable housing, this comes with a social cost. The 77 new homes built in the valley didn't trigger any CIL contribution, which would have amounted to something in the region of £1 million if it had been a private residential development. Stanmore badly needs resources, and relying on the Carroll Centre, which is effectively the only institution in the area to do all the hard work, isn't fair. £1 million into Stanmore would make a tremendous and meaningful difference. I've personally had an involvement with the Carroll Centre for over almost 25 years and know the excellent work it does. The county used to fund the youth provision service there, which was well respected and well used. That's gone. Sure Start no longer exists there. It's great having the data to know where the resources should be directed, but actually, to be truthful, I didn't need the data to confirm what I already knew, and that's that Stanmore has a real desire. And I know the whole of Winchester, so I know St Paul's, where I was brought up, but there is a pressing need there. By not providing facilities, we've had the issues of youngsters collecting in the Waverway shops. They had the exclusion order. You, Chair, are aware that Stanmore youngsters go up to Badger Farm and cause havoc because they've got nothing more to do. Stanmore used to have 2 pubs. They've both gone. They had large gardens. It was somewhere for parents to take children. So to state the blatantly obvious, with so many people there and so few facilities, it's going to be an ongoing problem. And I hope that we can translate what's in the report into something more meaningful. I happen to live in Stanmore, but I was coming to know about Stanmore not because I'm a Stanmore resident. But thank you very much, Chair. Thank you.
Any questions? There is a great deal of problems in Stanmore, whether it's the number of students or it's the people or the drug problems, and we do need to put some effort in that area, I believe. The interesting thing is when you look at the Scouts, the majority of the Scouts that meet in Stanmore don't live in Stanmore. And it's a question of how you get the youths of Stanmore to get involved in something that's useful and creative. So, yes, I agree with some of what you say. Thank you. Councillor Becker, would you like to?
Very brief introduction, particularly given the time. So I'm proud to bring this report tonight, and I'd like to pass on my thanks to Sue and the team and Councillor Ferguson, who led the work when she was responsible for this portfolio. Just leading on from what Mr. Tate has said, this is just an audit of what we have, so we can see what we have in the community, what we provide, what others are able to provide. This isn't a snapshot where we say, look how brilliant we are, and we leave it. This is the starting point for any additional work that we are able to do. Other thing I would say is that when we are developing our facilities, we need to listen to the needs of young people and find out what it is they want the council to provide and what they want the community to provide. Through the vision for Winchester in particular, we did work with teenage girls and asked them in particular what they would like in terms of community facilities and recreational facilities. And that's something I would like to see those discussions to continue further. But I'll pass over to Mrs. Robbins to do the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I will do quite a rapid run through because it is a large presentation, and hopefully you've all read it and the report. And I would echo the sentiment that this is an audit. It's based on desk research and looking at what information is available, contacting people and asking them for contributions to provide the details about what is available for children and young people. And I would say in this case, we've used quite a broad category of between 0 and 24 years old. Sometimes that changes where the data is available for different groups of children and young people, and that's set out in the report as well. So I'll run through it, and it's really just to reiterate that we'll be covering the work that we've done to collect data, some of the insights, so that is that voice of children and young people and who is collecting that and what are the sorts of things that they're raising areas of interest and opportunity and concern and need. And then an audit of the facilities that we have across the district as well, and just some early conclusions from those findings. This presentation builds on the communities and wellbeing presentation that was provided to the committee in October, which looked at more of the physical activity and the sports programmes that the councils and other partners provide across the district. And of course, our youth offer sits very much across that and complements that work as part of our wellbeing provision. And of course, the council supports and recognises the importance of children and young people in the district through the council plan. And I've just highlighted some of the priorities that cite that importance. So for the first section, we looked at data. You will know that some of the census information is starting to come out now. And I think the highlight from here is to, yes, the district has grown and so has the number of households, but this has been in the 65 plus age groups. And actually, we are seeing a decrease in the children and young people's groups. So as mentioned, that represents just about 30% of the overall population. And actually, although I didn't include it here from the 2011 census, we have lost something like 2,700 children and young people over that 10-year period. So although the figures stay the same at about 30%, because there's been growth, it's disproportional loss in that group. And yes, we have a high number of young children and young people in the district, and in comparison to the southeast, outside of the unitaries. Again, looking at the distribution of, I am flicking through this quickly, so looking at the distribution of then the children and young people across the district's wards, as already identified, the town wards have the highest share of the young people, and St Luke, St Paul and St Bartholomew and St Michael all having more than the district share of 30%, heading up to over 50% in St Luke. And apologies, in your presentation pack, this slide didn't print properly, but here you'll see that actually what I was trying to highlight was looking forward into the forecasts for 2027. It's actually the 15 to 19 age group that is seeing the significant growth across both male and female. So apologies that didn't print properly, but it's really just to highlight that is the largest group. That group is seeing the largest forecast growth. So the next section is to highlight some of the consultation, engagement and research that ourselves, national and regional organisations have undertaken to hear that voice of children and young people. And I'll just run through some of those for you. So Make Your Mark, let me just check my notes, apologies. Here we are. So Make Your Mark is run by UK Youth Parliament for 11 to 18-year-olds and involves over 780 schools, colleges and youth groups. And in the results from 2022 show that the top areas of concern was environment, jobs, money, homes, opportunities, health and well-being. Another national survey run by the Department of Culture, Media and Sport for their youth review looked at the engaged with around 6,000 young people and also the youth sector itself. And for young people, their areas of concern were activities, volunteering, mental and physical health, and being part of that decision-making process. And more locally, the local police and crime commissioners youth commission consulted with 14 to 25-year-olds across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. And naturally, this did focus more on sort of crime and safety and those sorts of issues. And overwhelmingly, the top priority there and the area of concern was safety on the streets. And you can see there that there are other areas of concern as well. And really, that was looking about the conclusions from that was thinking around education, raising awareness, and creating safe spaces. Again, for the county, they have the Hampshire Youth Parliament, and that is a representative organisation seeking change through allowing young people to represent issues and be a voice. And they do that mainly through campaigns, and two key campaigns at the moment are health and the environment. So you'll start to see through these insights some recurring themes coming through: environment, mental health, physical health, feeling safe, things to do. And I've just highlighted a few tables here. These are extracts from the Hampshire Children's Trust Children and Young People's Plan, and they again did a large piece of engagement, and these are just some of the extracts from that plan, and I've tried to highlight again some of those recurring areas of interest, things that people make happy, and things that they most want to see improved. And again, it's activity, safety, mental health. As mentioned, environment, a key issue, and locally there was the Young Persons Climate Assembly in November 21, and from that 25 recommendations came forward looking at things around energy, buildings, homes, food, jobs and lifestyles. And then the council also undertook a quite extensive piece of insight work around housing issues and housing interests with 18 to 35-year-olds, and really wanted to understand what their needs were, what their wants were across those different age brackets. And the 18 to 22-year-olds, the group that really fit within the area that we've been looking at, certainly more willing to consider flats, less likely to ask for help, and least likely to be informed. So sort of an interesting aspect there about how do you provide information to children, young people on the housing. And I know the housing team reported this to the policy committee in quite detail over a couple of presentations, and they're continuing that work, I'm sure. Finally, on the insights, the resident survey, which was completed for 2022, had an element which had 500 young people asking about rating what it's like to live in Winchester. And I think an overwhelming sentiment that it was a good place to live, very good place to live. But when you actually look a little bit deeper around, okay, what makes it a good place? It's easy to focus on the things that people like, the green, and convenient, good open spaces, feeling safe. It's as interesting to look at what most needs improving, and safety is one of the things that most need improving. Good selection of shops, so things to do, venues for gigs and concerts, and affordable housing. So some of the things we heard about earlier about the insights around people's wants certainly reflected in the resident survey about things that most need improving. This was then asking around people wanting to stay in the district, and for students, I think it's clear that there was not a desire, that's quite the right word. There was a response that demonstrated that actually people needed to move away because of either lack of opportunities, the cost, or employers were based elsewhere. And for non-students, actually that followed a similar sort of response as well, wanting to develop their career elsewhere, and the cost of living here. So the last section of work that we did was the audit, which is really looking at the facilities, support services and funding that's going into children and young people's services and facilities. We ourselves as a council manage play areas and skate parks and muggers, etc. And these are mainly in the town wards, and we know that parish councils obviously have a range of open spaces facilities that they fund and manage themselves. And we also didn't look at private provision, if there was any private clubs. And we know from the website research there are a lot of society and clubs in the area, but we haven't listed all of that. I have got that information, but it's not included in your pack. So the map here, a bit of time lag. The map here just shows across the town wards where the public open spaces are, and I've highlighted the existing muggers. There's 2 at Cromwell Road and the one at KGV. So it's just to give you a locational aspect of that. But then drilling down a little bit deeper for the town wards, this is looking at the sorts of sports facilities, but also profiled with the age groups in those town wards. And as already highlighted, St Luke's, St Matthew and St Paul's have a high proportion of 15 to 19-year-olds, which is the grey colour. The blue colour is the younger group of 5 to 9, and the orange is 10 to 4. It's a bit small on the presentation, but that's just to give you an idea of those age groups and the types of facilities available to those town wards. But we did look at the district as well, and so just to show that there are, a range of public open spaces across our market towns as well. The joint strategic needs assessment from Hampshire County Council is an excellent resource, setting out a number of socioeconomic factors, a lot of it data collected and then mapped. So, for example, this one I've highlighted here looks at access to leisure facilities, and the dark blue being the worst access. So you can see that actually access across the district is by no means equal across the area. Similarly, they look at data around mental health, and what I've highlighted here is the change in mental health. And over the period between 2017 and 21, actually the 17 to 23-year-old age group saw a significant deterioration in mental health and the least increase in improvement. So you can see even within the age groups, there's a different experience about improvements in mental health. There is a lot of information about what support services are available. Hampshire County Council, who have responsibility for children and young people, have a website and have details of local support services. For example, 99 are listed for the Winchester district, and I've highlighted as well that we at the District Council also list support services, and I've just highlighted arts organisations here because I think sometimes the sort of cultural aspect of support services sometimes gets missed. So there is a very wide range of information available for people to know where to go to get help. And similarly, the skills and participation team have a very good interactive map about where you can go if you want to participate in skills or if you want to participate in outdoor learning. So again, a good resource there. Then looking at the sorts of organisations we fund, the council certainly by no means does all this work on its own, but it does fund a number of key organisations through our community and voluntary sector grants, and they are based across the district. We also offer SIL funding, the community infrastructure, so local groups can invest in their own sports and recreation facilities as well. And we invest directly in new provision. So just highlighted some of the recent investments that have taken place for new community and sports facilities. So my conclusions is that there is a lot of information, data and insight available, and we've collected it. I've highlighted some in this report, but in undertaking the work, we actually collected a lot more than this, so the community team does have that information. It is available across a lot of organisations, which sometimes might make it difficult to navigate and understand where the best place to go. And we are looking at how we can increase children and young people's voice and involvement in decision-making processes. And also we want to see how we can support further community-led activity, which really embodies some of the work around the Winchester Town Vision and the parish plans work that we're doing in local communities across the district. And so I wanted to end on one of the pieces of work that we are taking forward is to draw together a step-by-step guide, if you will, or a toolkit to help local communities access information to help bring forward new facilities, improved or changed facilities. And it was interesting to hear about the survey that had been undertaken locally, because that is a key aspect of bringing forward new facilities. And it will be a useful guide of sources of information, support from the council and local and national organisations. So really try and draw together into a single signposting resource a lot of the information needed to bring projects forward. And I think I shall conclude there, Chair. Thank you. And apologies for such a rapid run through a lot of data.
No, appreciate that. Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, a lot of incredibly valuable information here, Sue. Thank you very much. And thank the team that produced it. But I'm curious about one thing, and that is the comprehensive schools not mentioned. For many years, I think it must be something like 30, maybe 40 years now, the county has been providing sports provision for communities via the comprehensive schools. And if we take Swanwell College as an example, which is the one I know best, that's a community college. So all the sports facilities, including the two muggers on site, are available for community use. Now, by community, I'm talking about the whole of the Swanwell College catchment area, which includes Whiteley, incidentally, although they're still waiting, I think, 4 or 5 years down the road for their comprehensive school, alongside Meadowside and their input. So why have you left all of these comprehensive school facilities out of your, what otherwise is a very valuable survey? And by the way, some of the Bishop's Waltham open spaces are Sheila sites and they're being built on. So.
Sorry, I hadn't realised I put it on. So with regard to the provision within schools, we have collected some of the data. We didn't include it in the presentation summary. It was getting quite lengthy, but also we wanted to understand actually more work might need to be done to understand when it was available, what times. So it was actually needing a bit more work to be able to include it, and we hadn't had the time or the resources to do that at this stage. But I do take your point. We know that there are schools and, as I say, other private facilities as well that could be accessed. So do take your point. We'll follow up on that.
All of these facilities are available for the young people during the day, obviously as part of their physical exercise programs, also in the evening and weekends. So don't you agree there's a gap in your information here? I mean, I know we don't like to praise Hampshire Education Committee, but they deserve some praise for this.
I can take that back and ask the team to look at what information we did find and see if it can be completed and included. But it's not included because I don't believe it was complete by the time we were doing this report. I'll look into it.
That would be good, Sue, because it would fill in some gaps that shouldn't be there.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, Councillor. I'm sorry. Rob.
Just quickly following up from Ian Tate's question about Stanmore. I hadn't realised the Valley didn't attract SIL money, but I suppose that makes sense because it was a development the City Council did on our own land, so that does make sense. But would that development be able to apply for general SIL funds? So could the community of St Luke's Ward apply to the general sill, even though there was no sill allocated as part of the valley development?
I'm not an expert on how sill is allocated, so I would have to take that away. It probably depends on who has access to the facility as to who funds it. So I'll have to find that out. Sorry.
I was wondering, yes. Councillor Jackie. Can I help here? Sorry, there was a still question, as we had the expert in the room. Can I? Oh, Dawn.
Rule isn't that city council housing doesn't achieve SIL. It is that affordable housing doesn't charge SIL. So if you're building affordable housing, whether it's done by us, whether it's done by a social landlord, then it doesn't get charged SIL. So it's a category of, it's basically affordable housing is the category that I believe doesn't get charged SIL. It's not city council owned thing. If we were building market housing, we'd pay SIL.
You're right, but the question was around where it's ring fenced, if you can then spend SIL. So that Stanmore can apply for SIL is the answer. Stanmore could apply for SIL if it can prove that it has an infrastructure need that's been driven by development.
Yes, there is no geographic limit. So we recognise that the pressures of development don't come necessarily where housing is built, and the interventions that are needed to address the pressures of development don't necessarily come where housing is built. So we've taken, as an example, you know, St Michael Ward has not paid for the facilities that have been built there, like the leisure centre, because they address pressure from a wide region, and the SIL contribution reflects that from the district.
Thank you for that clarity.
Trying to remember what my question was. Thanks, Sue, for the report. You mentioned about facilities for housing for younger people. How, as a council, can we highlight that more to the young people that, you know, they should put their name on the housing list? How can we explain a bit more to them how to assess that?
I think the work of the housing team through their next generation activity, they led on that work, so they are now taking forward the findings and they've presented here. So it'd be for the housing team to determine the best course of action about promoting the options available.
Any further questions? Councillor Baldwin.
Thanks for that. This could just be an educational thing because it's day one of this committee for me. But I just wondered whether there's a roadmap and a timetable for where you're going next with all of this. Thanks.
At this stage, it was presenting the data, and then I think some of the activity that I've highlighted around the community tool guide, the steps, and that's something that we're planning in for next year's activities. So I say next year, the next year. Thank you. Yeah. So that is, we started on it already, and we'll be working through that. The wider conclusions and the wider findings have to be programmed in. It won't only be the communities team, the economy and communities service that needs to consider that. So that has to be programmed in more widely. So we don't have that timetable yet.
Councillor Westwood.
Thank you. So, Mrs. Robbins, on the map that you put up of public open spaces, I see you'd included school fields. So if I look at the St Paul area, you've included the Westgate school fields and so on. They're not really public open spaces for a start. So labelled incorrectly, but it begs a different question in that the schools have great facilities. So if I look at something like Simmons, it's got a 3G football pitch, for example. So would it be useful to try and map on where we've got some good facilities that may be privately owned within the city boundaries and within other districts that could potentially be used?
Thank you. I think it probably takes leads on from the comment about the school's provision for facilities. I'd have to look at how extensive a piece of work we were able to do a certain amount of research around this, so I'll have to take that away and understand, how detailed that is before I can commit to the level of information we can layer on to this.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Yes, so within the recommendations, we're asked to support this programme of work and that it will be carried out in liaison with Winchester Town Forum. Now, I appreciate that that is a substantial amount of residents, but it isn't the sum of the whole of the district. So I would question, why is it specifically going to them and not being given out to parish councils or anything like that?
The reason why that is being carried out in liaison with the town forum is because lots of these questions did originate from the town forum, with questions about facilities like muggers and all-weather pitches. So, and then decisions were made for this paper to come to this committee. So in effect, this is a joint paper that should be presented, but the results of which are of interest to both the town forum and this committee, because most of the facilities that the council are responsible for are based within the town, because the parishes outside of the town provide most of those recreational facilities in the other parts of the district. That guide is not going to be purely for residents of the town. It's not going to only be produced in conjunction with the town forum. It will be further populated and discussed with parishes as well, and with ward members from other parts of the district. But because of the particular interest of the town forum, given the location of most of our recreational facilities, that's why the town forum is highlighted, but it's not certainly the only focus for this work.
Thank you. I hope you included some of the facilities that we are able to use at the Army Training Regiment, because I have managed to get quite a few of their areas being used by the city people, and that's quite an important thing from their point of view as well. Looking at the young people across the district, we've got a lot in St Bartholomew, St Luke's and St Paul's, but these are student areas as well. Now, can we split those numbers off so we can see where the students are, because the students use a lot of their facilities from the university. At the same time, people like Stanmore, where they are of a lower economic standard, need a lot more help in getting together and playing sport and learning things, just to help with the trouble that we've had in the past. It'd be a great thing that we need to do in the right places in the city. So we need to look at it and identify those areas as well.
Yes, the data can be split down into into more granularity of age groups. So I could go back, but I'd have to look. It might be 19 to 24 or 18, but it is more granular than I provided here, and we can break that down. Yes.
Thank you. Any further? Councillor Warwick.
It's just something you'll know. When the leisure centre was built, there was a lot of paid for reports to inform that decision to build those facilities. And there's the KKP report, which is 2013. That looks at every field, mugger, everything across the whole district. I would have thought that would have been your starting point, because it included schools. There were quite a few errors in that, or assumptions that if you're going to have access, not every school allows access to their sports facilities. So some of the private schools have got different rules than some the county-owned facilities. So, and there haven't been that many changes, but it'd be interesting to overlay the census data on that report, because it's probably not changed a great deal other than our own built facility, of course.
Just to jump in, there was an update done to the open space assessment in 2022.
It's the built facility, so it's slightly different. So it's a private commissioned report, but it's on the website, so that would look good.
Thank you. I'll look at that. probably because of the date of it, I didn't go back that far in the research, but that's a useful one to look at. Thank you. Really good one. Thank you.
Councillor Cutler.
Yeah, I was just wondering, really, when you look at the children and young people across the district, once you, if you could take the student element out of it, what you'd actually find is that it's pretty even across the district. That there's not really a statistical difference in the proportions. You know, the Upper Mearn Valley does get small, you know, sort of is low, but the population is a 2-member ward as well. You know, it's a smaller population as a whole anyway. So I just wonder if those, particularly the St Luke's and Michael and St Paul, well, all the city ones, probably that's where the students are, that's where the universities are. That's, if they could be separated out, it would create, it seems likely that you would actually end up with virtually no statistical difference between all the wards. And so the way we should be approaching things for the non-students is effectively the same everywhere.
Any further comments? Yes, thank you. Debate on the recommendations.
Right, thank you. This is a subject that's dear to my heart because I've spoken about this at the Winchester Town Forum before, quite a long time ago actually. I think it's great that we're focusing on facilities for that younger age group. I think this is a fantastic city for those of us that like nice restaurants and a bit of shopping and all the rest of it. And I'm sure that age group uses it as well. But I just get the feeling that there's not enough done for the under 25, shall we say, and specifically when I've spoken about it before, it's sort of the 12 to 20s, 12 to 18, something like that. I think more can be done for those people. It's been talk about the wards. I don't suppose any of these people know which ward they live in anyway. So, you know, it's a way of categorising it, but don't lose sleep over ward boundaries because I don't think that's relevant to their lives. I've already commented on this. I think we should look at the city holistically as a whole, because if you look across some of the more private organisations, there's superb facilities. Anywhere you go, there's a badminton club in Charenton Road. Whoever knew that? Well, I didn't until I moved there, and it's great. But you've got all the school facilities, you've got the university facilities, you've got the leisure centre clearly, you've got the Winchester College facilities, and we've got other fields that run by the river down there. And there's such a wealth of different facilities around this city that possibly could be made better use of. Equally, there's a need for non-paid facilities. We heard Tim talk about muggers and so on. I've got a chap in my ward who's talking to me about more 3G football pitches. He coaches at Winchester City Flyers and so on. He'll be coming to the town forum soon. So I think there's a lot that we could and should be doing in this area. We look a little bit more broadly in terms of what I might have called youth clubs when I was much younger, but places where people can go of that age and meet safely. I think there's more that can be done in that area, which is probably, you know, grants to the right organisations and so on. So look at Unit 12 and what they're doing with the younger groups. I'm sure there'll be much more in that space as well around the city with a bit more focus. You know, I think it's a great initiative. Just want to see it taken forward in such a way that we can look at this more holistically. It's not about you know, ward boundaries and so on. It is looking more broadly at what we provide in a range of requirements for I would say the teens to 20s in this city, which can be considerably enhanced and improved, and I think it'll be a great value and well supported. So good work, but I think there's so much more that we need to do at this stage, including talking to them And I'm well aware that Councillor Williams over here is probably the only one sitting around this table, this side anyway, that has had experience of younger people in this city in recent times and still has it. And you can probably speak from more experience than I can, but I think it's a great initiative, but loads to be done.
Cutler?
Yeah, I think again it's a matter of Councillor Westwood made the point about ward boundaries not mattering, particularly within the city. Most things would be reasonably accessible. If you took my ward as an example, you'd have to be granular with it, because the people living in West Waterlooville are not going to use the facilities in Wickham. If you're a young person travelling, once you're out in the rural areas, becomes a problem. So where things are fairly concentrated in the city, the travelling distance becomes less of an issue, I suppose. Whereas, sort of in the villages, getting anywhere is actually quite difficult, and probably more difficult than it was in the past. I mean, I used to cycle everywhere when I was 10 to 18, but a lot of people won't do that now because it's not so safe to do as it was then. But even then, the Upper Mearn Valley, if you're in West Mearn, you're not really going to want to travel, or it's not easy to go to Warnford or if you're that age, because even though it's only a couple of miles, it's quite difficult to get there. So I think we need to be taking that into account when we're looking at outside of the city. I think actually it's slightly easier to look at it from the city point of view as to what's needed. Even Councillor Pearson was talking about sort of in Central Mearn Valley. Yes, Swanmore's got the facilities. People from my ward go to school in Swanmore, but they can't use the facilities in the evening when they've come home from the bus. So it's a slightly different problem. That's all, and I just think we need to be aware of that balance between the city and the rural district.
That's Williams.
I was going to say, one of the biggest complaints I know that my teenage daughters and also my students complain about is the fact that there really is nowhere to go of an evening when you get to a certain age. And that's been a lifelong problem. I still remember my French oral, I mentioned it, there's nothing for the young to do. I still recall that all these years later, and there never was when I was young, but once you got to a certain age, you could go to a pub. And that's actually become quite difficult now because it's incredibly expensive to go to the pub. And that's potentially not the place we want our youngsters hanging out. So we need to have something that's an organised, safe place for them. And I think that's got to be a really key thing. There's lots of issues for young people, and mental health is one of them. We know that loneliness is growing, and that is a massive issue to their mental health. Friends online, as lovely as they are, they're not real friends. And most of the time you can't meet with them and talk with them. And actually, one of the nicest things for me when I was young was youth clubs and doing things like that. I didn't enjoy brownies and Girl Guides. I wasn't that kind of person, but I loved a youth club. And I think we need to have that option of the uniformed, organised things. How do we get, and I know Mr. Tate was talking about the fact in Stanmore, how do we get people who perhaps would not be likely to use those because they're actually coming in from other areas to use them, but is there actually something that would work better for them? And I think that's got to be a really key thing that we're letting our young people down on. They need somewhere to go, they need a place to actually be able to meet people and actually build bonds and friendships and communities. It's something we're massively missing as a society, and the group that is getting the most impacted is the young, and COVID has only just made that chasm worse. We know that, and dealing on the front of mental health every day with with students, it is a growing, and it's a ticking time bomb that we've got on our hands. We have to start tackling it and supporting them.
Councillor Porter.
May I join the debate?
Yeah.
The officers, everybody had a very good list of who was actually around for young people. And I appreciate that was really concentrating on a list which was Winchester based, but Wise Services do a lot of work in the southern parishes. They're very well known. They are partly county council officers who are then also youth workers, and they offer services to young people for free. They do offer activities to do as well. Street Reach has a football every Friday evening for nothing. You just turn up. And Y Services does a similar thing down in the south of the district. So there are things that are available using the services that you're describing, Chris, Councillor Westwood, but they have to be booked. That's the difference about school sites. They have to be booked, and they have to be booked by somebody who can afford to book it months ahead, even years ahead. And so, just to give an example, it's a couple of £100 a month. So people need to be organised in order to do that. And actually, just to tell you that Street Reach actually also has a youth club. I'm not a trustee, I used to be, but has a youth club in Richwood Ever, and it has a minibus, and it takes them to the cinema in Basingstoke. It takes them out bowling. It takes them to various things, because those children often have never experienced those things, even though they're 12, 13 and 14. So there are things there for disadvantaged children. But actually we could do with, and actually the point is that all children are disadvantaged, and all children need that support, so that when they are disadvantaged, they know who to go to. So that's the trusted adult conversation. And I think a lot of this does depend on not just the space, but having the trusted adult there too, so that they feel safe.
Councillor Pearson.
I think we're tending to forget a little bit the old adage, you can take a horse to water to drink. Now, all of our young people are aware that sports facilities are available in their comprehensive schools, and indeed most of the primary schools. I agree with Councillor Portman to say that often these facilities are best accessible through teams, and certainly in the southern parishes, there are some big teams. Waltham Wolves, for example, I forget, something like 200 young people, I think, both sexes, play soccer through that team, rather like the Winchester Flyers, which is specifically a single-sex organisation. But was it 400 members of that team? And they access to facilities through the club, mostly down King George V, but also a couple elsewhere. St Swithun's and Winchester College, of course, have their own facilities, some of which are available for community use, especially if the school has links with a local primary school. They do a lot of sort of teamwork that way. Certainly the college does, and the university does as well, incidentally. A lot of university students going out of their course. They have to do a term where they're doing community work. A lot of that community work is sporting, but not entirely, because we're forgetting things like dance, which is available as well. And a lot of young people take part in dance, and yet, we don't normally think of that as a physical activity. And yes, there are a lot of people of both sexes taking part in dance, including some of the what we used to call tearaways, who've opted out of school. And one way we use to get them back into school is through dance. And we've got that facility just across the road from here. It doesn't deal with many, but it's important. The same with disabled sports. That's growing, particularly in Winchester, a little less so out because of the, I don't know who said it, the distances we have to travel. I guess our children learn very quickly. They've got to be, to a degree, self-contained rather than looking for somebody to entertain them. That's not to say they turn their back on the facility, so they don't. I mean, the college, and I think Meadowside as well, is very actively used by all ages. We've also got that facility on the Market Street. I don't know if that's the right word, where you've got the climbing frames there, which again is actively used by groups that go there. So, this is what I'm saying. The gaps for young people, which have been provided, are not here. And I think we are assuming that they don't exist, but they do exist. We haven't, unfortunately, the survey hasn't come up with them, principally from the schools. And the Hampshire Education put, I think it was something like 3 or 4 million into Swanmore College. Winchester put 2 million into Swanmore College in order to develop community facilities. And then on, this college has been developed via CIL money, but that facility provided tennis courts, provided muggers, it provided open areas for the children to congregate, which are all covered in. More facilities, I think, that people realise if they don't go to the college, or they're not linked with the college in some way. And I'm sure you'll find exactly the same thing if you inquire of the comprehensive schools here in Winchester. The facilities are there. I'm not sure how close those comprehensive schools in Winchester are to the community, but the very function of Swanmore College now is to have those links with the community, and a very valuable one through sport. Meadowside, we've deliberately built up Meadowside. Not always sure that we've given the right amount of proportion of funding into Meadowside that we should have done in the past. And I think now we're waiting for the hopeful facilities to come out of the comprehensive school where they will go in, because that's the way the schools are designed now, to provide these facilities for young people. And it's a question of, will they go along and use them? Well, you can't make them. All you can say is, look, they're the facilities for you to use. And we do use team sports. Unfortunately, the schools are going the direction of trying to have individual sports, like running, cross country, biking. Just have a look at the biking fest around Winchester, see how many young people take place in that. And all you need is a bike, and the streets of Winchester hopefully closed off while you're doing it. But it happens, and you know, so I'm not deriding this. I'm just saying that there's an important section of this missing. We really should take note of, because it's quite significant, especially in the rural areas. But it's a good report. It's a valuable report because it's not been done before, not in this way anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Jim.
Councillor Bolton. Okay. Yes, recommendations. Is everybody in agreement with the recommendations? Would anybody like anything else added?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Well,
Agreed.
thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you. Just to say that I visited Swanmore College with Councillor Pearson on Monday and was incredibly impressed by the facilities there. And I think that's a fantastic model for us to look at, using those community facilities, using those school facilities in a more community minded way. And I will definitely be looking to facilitate discussions with the schools to see how we can use their facilities in a broader community sense. That would be, I mean, I was impressed by the description of it and my very brief walkthrough with you, so be very happy to do that.
Right. Meeting's closed. Everybody go home. Thank you very much.